Hello. Uh, so, this was actually the second time I've attempted this because I made a video on this band and the albums I have of theirs a few days ago, but it wasn't very good. So we'll try again. And the band is Massive Attack. Massive Attack. Massive Attack are a British. Now this is always hard. How would you really classify them? A British electronic alternative. I'll use this word, even though I know that I've seen interviews specifically where they loathe this word, but trip hop band, group, collective from Bristol in England. So they came up in the early 90s, or late 80s, I think they first formed. And they grew out of a. And what I'm saying here is just stuff I've read over the years. So some of it might be wrong. I've read interviews and seen interviews and read articles and all sorts of things about them over the last 25 years. They started off as a musical, or no, an artistic collective called Wild Bunch. And it wasn't just the three guys that we typically think of, or at least now it's two, of Massive Attack. It was a wider group, and it was things like hip hop and art, like graffiti art, and I think like breakdancing and DJing and so on and so forth. And that kind of split off, and some of them went into Massive Attack and formed Massive Attack. And I'm pretty sure this is their first album. It's certainly their first major label album, put out on Virgin. Now, all these, or actually not all of them, this one here is secondhand. You can see I got this for $2, but I own this new. This might be the third time I've owned it. I remember certainly owning it brand new in 1999. I bought it, and maybe another type subsequently to them, but I can't remember. This particular one I probably got in the last 2 years, and the condition is, for secondhand, is excellent. I just played this last night, plays through fine, no issues. Blue Lines, I didn't say that's the name of the album. By some people, is considered kind of a classic and a pivotal album in that genre. Whatever genre Massive Attack are, I think really Massive Attack are a genre unto themselves. I say before about that term trip hop. Trip hop was a term that came out in the 90s that kind of described those things I just kind of mentioned, like a combination of hip hop and electronica, so maybe some drum and bass, ambient down tempo, quite a dark sound. And I'd say all those things I just described, Massive Attack fits into those in one way or another, but also goes outside of those as well. Um, some other kind of bands that were associated with trip hop, I guess. Well, Portishead, which are another group from Bristol as well, same place. Well, at least maybe not Bristol, but around Bristol, in that west area of England, the West Country. Um, I guess Tricky, who was involved and actually features on this first album. Um, Sneaker Pimps, at least in the early stuff. Um, anyway, there are interviews where specifically they say they hate that term. It pigeonholes them. It's an invented term by the media. It doesn't fully, it puts bands together that don't actually share things that in common, and so on and so forth. But that's a common thing, that bands that get kind of labeled with these new labels like grunge or new metal, they often kind of resent that and kind of try and throw it off because they don't want to be put into this like narrow limiting group. Like a band like, for example, Deftones, they always hated the term new metal and they didn't want to be associated with the new metal scene, even though you could say certainly their first two albums had a lot of new metal elements. Um, 7-string guitars down tuned, kind of those repetitive chuggy riffs without guitar solos. They had a DJ, or they still do. Chino rapped. So a lot of those things were exactly tick the boxes of new metal, but they kind of presciently they could see that new metal was going to be a fad, and if they tied themselves too closely to that and to those bands, it would kind of taint them going forward. And I think they kind of were successful. They kind of stood alone outside of those other groups and kind of had a much longer career and a more kind of acceptance critically, and it's kind of like a cool band. Anyway, not going off too off track here. So at this stage in the band, we got these three guys featuring on the album photo. We got that guy there, 3D, or Robert. I've heard his name pronounced in about 20 different ways. Dalnaha is how I would guess, or Dalnaya. I've also heard it Dalnaja, pronouncing the J, and I've heard another person call it Dalnia. I don't know how it can be Dalnia, but it's Naja. And I'm pretty sure I read that his dad was Portuguese. And isn't Portuguese, don't they pronounce the J as a, different from Spanish that don't enunciate it? I don't know. Anyway, in the middle is Daddy G, Grant Marshall, Grantley Marshall, I think is his full name. And on the side there, over here is Mushroom, Andrew Voles or Vowles. I'm not sure how to pronounce his name. Also featuring on this album is Tricky. He features, he does his vocals on one of the songs. He might be in one of these pictures actually. Now, Massive Attack are kind of famous for using quite an extensive list of a rotating cast of guest vocalists, because none of those three guys there of the core of the band you would say necessarily is the vocalist for the band. Certainly they all lend their vocals to different songs at different times, but not as the main and only vocalist. So they've used, and one of them is that lady there, that's Shara Nelson. She does the vocals on maybe one of their most famous songs, Unfinished Sympathy, one of my favorite songs of theirs. The first song I ever heard of theirs back would have been in the early mid-90s, I would guess around 93 or 94. I saw the video for that on Music TV. And when the first time I heard that song, I was blown away. I talked about this in a previous video last week, just coincidentally, that the first 20 seconds of Unfinished Sympathy is one of, if not my favorite intro of any song ever across any genre. It starts off with a bass, dum 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 dum, then does it like a record scratch, and there's someone saying something, like you can hear someone's voice just kind of within the mix, and then the ding 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 ding. It's like I don't know if it's a sample or not, of like bells or chimes or something that kind of repeats throughout the whole song. It like gives me goosebumps every time I listen to it. Amazing. Then Sharon Nelson's vocal comes in, very kind of soulful vocal, and then it's got these strings throughout as well. And this where it builds up to the ending, the finale of the song, there's this part where the strings kind of change a little bit, and I don't know who did the string arrangement. It probably says in here, but it's beautiful, amazing, just like a perfect song. It's 3D again. So here we got the credits for each one. So there's Unfinished Sympathy. So we got Sharon Nelson, strings engineer Hayden, strings arranged and conducted by Will Malone. I've never heard of him before, but there we go. Doesn't say anything here about a sample, so I'm going to assume that you can see it's written there by G. Marshall, A. Vowles, R. Delnaya, J. Sharp, don't know who that would be, and S. Nelson. So maybe she did the lyrics, I guess. The other person who is featured throughout their career is Horace Andy. You can see he's there on One Love. He's on that last song. Hymn of the Big Wheel, maybe one of the only songs of theirs that I've never really liked. It kind of really stands out as a much more light, I wouldn't say upbeat song, but just a much more lighter, brighter song. A lot of the stuff that I think that colors Massive Attack's work throughout their career is a real ability to capture dark vibes, a sinister darkness, almost sometimes like a creepiness. And I don't mean creepy as an ooh, ick way. I mean more as a like kind of like a, like I said, sinister. But that kind of it's not. It doesn't have to be an evilness, like that song "Safe from Harm." The thing that kind of gives a darkness to me, that song, is the bass line, do 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 do, and then the synths underneath. You have this real the atmospheric kind of picture they paint. And I guess Sarah Nelson's vocals got quite a sadness to them as well. Oh, there we go. So this Tricky Kid. That's Tricky. Oh, sorry, man. This focus drives me crazy. It doesn't used to do this. I don't know why it does it now. Maybe it's the light. If I turn the light, yeah, that's okay. There we go. Maybe that's the issue. So yeah, Tricky. What song was Tricky? So I can't remember. Vocals: Shara Nelson, Horace Andy, Tony Bryan, Massive Attack, and Horace Andy, Massive Attack. Okay, there's not one specifically just Tricky. That's right. So he's just included in Massive Attack. So from what I remember, he just wanted to go and solo, and so after this album, he did so. But he's always been kind of interconnected with Massive Attack in one way or another, although he has his own solo career. So that's the first thing I have. Now, next in their career was Protection, I believe. This came out in 1991. 1990 or 1991. Then I think 94 was Protection, which I don't have, and I've never owned Protection. Then 97 was Mezzanine. Mezzanine is kind of, I guess, maybe considered their greatest album. I remember when it came out, it was, people were doing, like, the critics were doing backflips over it, like how amazing it was, and it was like, you see it feature quite commonly on like top 50 greatest albums of the 90s or top 50 greatest albums of all times, or so it's very well regarded. Now, I own Mezzanine new about 20 years ago, as I did Blue Lines, but at some stage it was lost or stolen or sold. I can't remember exactly. Next, what I have in their discography chronologically is 100th Window, which I believe came out in 2003. 2003? 2002. Oh, 2003, there we go, 2003. Now, this was seen as a little, people certainly don't see this as good as Protection or Mezzanine. I'm not saying it's a bad album, it's got some great songs on it, but I'd probably agree it isn't as strong as the previous two. And I didn't mention that the use of get through the Protection and Mezzanine era, like they used Elizabeth Fraser from Cocteau Twins. She did the vocals on Teardrop, and Tracy Thorn from Everything But the Girl did the vocals on Protection, and I'm sure I'm forgetting another one. On here we have Sinead O'Connor, and she lends her vocals to, in my opinion, easily the best song on this album, which is What Your Soul Sings. Now I got this secondhand for 50 cents. You see this around quite often. This is the most common Massive Attack album to find secondhand in secondhand stores. And that maybe that's because it's not as appreciated as the other ones, maybe. They're not the kind of band I feel that people would buy their albums and then get rid of, because they're not like a just pick up for the sake of it type band, in my opinion. Although, actually, anyway, let me get into all that. Condition is excellent. They do this thing. They do this on this other one I'm going to show as well, where the CD doesn't have any coating or covering or coloring on the front side. And so sometimes it can be just quickly looking, hard to differentiate between the playable side and the non-playable side. Of course, there's that ring there. I don't know if you can see, it's kind of like a silvery ring. It kind of differentiates a little bit, but it can be confusing sometimes. It also seems like a waste. Like you could, some CDs, some albums have like really cool kind of art on the CD, printed on the CD. I always remember the Beatles compilations, the red and blue, double disc compilations. They have the apples, half and whole apple on them. Now, what happened? I'm skipping over a lot here because I'm trying to kind of cover their whole career, and I'm not that well versed in all of it. I do know that Mushroom, Andrew Vowles, left after Mezzanine. Like I said, Mezzanine was released in late 90s. 90s, maybe it was 96, 97, 97, 98. Hang on, I'm just quickly. 98, okay, 1998. It was later than I thought, actually. I thought it was more. So Mezzanine was 98. He didn't agree with the direction the band was going in. And that might have been, they were moving more and more away from the hip hop rap element and more into the purely alternative electronic side. And as far as I know, Mushroom had always been the biggest contributor of the hip hop rap side of the band. And so he felt he couldn't work within that band environment anymore, and he left. I also remember reading an interview. Now, this was literally like 25 years ago I read this interview. But I do remember reading an interview that he had some health issues, not major health issues, but he had like allergies and like sensitivities, like to like skin things, like maybe got psoriasis or eczema or something like that, and had other kind of food. And so touring was very, very difficult, as it would be, because I know, for example, my son just recently has been getting a bit of eczema. Nothing serious, but he got a little bit, and it's can be very hard to control, because you don't want to be using steroids the whole time, because that's opening a whole other can of worms. And so you got to try to identify the triggers, like is it a food, or is it some sort of kind of chemical, like a detergent or soap or shampoo? Is it something else in the air, like pollen, or it's... And then sometimes once you think you've got it under control, and then there's another flare up, and it's I imagine living with that, if you were every day moving to another hotel, another city, another country, it would be hellish. Because, trying to get food, you hear bands talking about that, trying to get food on tour in countries they're not familiar with. Just imagine, let's say you are in Germany tonight and you're playing a show, and so you had food from a German supermarket or German restaurant, then the next day you're playing a show in Romania, and same thing. And it can be hard to know, okay, am I going to be okay? Is there going to be some ingredient in this that's going to make me get this sickness or this kind of problem? So I think that was an element as well. But I've never really heard anything definitive. I'm sure he's given interviews after he left, but I've never read them. And I kind of looked briefly over the weekend online trying to find something, but there's actually very little of him online. Like interviews on YouTube, things like that. Like there's interviews while he was still in the band, but maybe it's out there and I just haven't really looked hard enough. But I'd be interested to hear exactly, musically at least, what was the reason why he felt he couldn't work within the band. Was it Was he being shut out by the other two? Or did he really dislike Mezzanine? Or anyway, onwards, when it came to making this album in 2003, this was almost a solo album for 3D, Robert Del Naja, because Daddy G, he wanted to take a break. He didn't want to quit the band, but he wanted to take a break. Now, again, similarly, I read interviews from the band around this time, and nothing was said. I think I have a vague memory that he had a new child. He had a kid with someone, his wife or whoever. He already had kids, I think, but this was like a newborn, and he really wanted to be present for the first, portion of the kid's life, and so therefore took a break from the band. Another thing I think I heard, he had writer's block, and he felt he couldn't work with 3D. Whatever, he doesn't feature on this album. Now, I'm pretty sure I remember looking through this when I got this secondhand a couple of years ago. His name is not even anywhere to be found in any of the thing. So it's got things as Robert, Neil, Lee. These are the people. So Robert Neil, Lee, and Alex. I think they were kind of like some of the players on the album, but there's nothing there from Grant. And there's also so you see some of the people he's thanking. You recognize some of those, like Liam and Natalie. That would be Liam Gallagher and Natalie Appleton, who he was married to at the time. Banksy. Well, there's that rumor, I don't know if it's true or not, that 3D is Banksy. Robert Del Naja is Banksy, because there was this thing where they tracked every time a new artwork was done by Banksy and it was such and such city, it corresponded with a tour date from Massive Attack in the same city. It wasn't exact, but I think it followed pretty closely. And like I said, in the early days of the pre-Massive Attack Wild Bunch collective, he was actually a graffiti artist, I'm pretty sure. Like he has an art background. But that one song I mentioned there was Sinead O'Connor, What Your Soul Sings. It's just an amazing song. Her vocal is beautiful. And again, the song has this real dark beauty about it. Like if you listen, like the way its intro, it kind of does this vocal effect, like I don't know what you'd call it. Like they take her vocal, but it's kind of like stretched, and then this kind of plucked string, ding ding ding, like a harp maybe, or I don't know what it is, but it's with the bass line underneath it and the synths underneath it. It's amazing. I think they do that better than any other band, any other group, whatever you want to call them. Okay, so that's what I own in terms, and then we get to this one, which is a greatest hits collection, and it's a little bit different than. Oh, my leg's going to sleep. I'm sitting on it. A little bit different than a usual best of collection. Well, one, it's in this kind of booklet digipack type thing, which I've talked about before. I'm not really a fan of these. They don't hold up to wear and tear very well at all. You can see here in that things it's kind of breaking away already between the paper, the card, and the glue on the back, I think. So we got this booklet in the middle, and we've got 2 discs either side of it. So just flicking through this. I picked this up secondhand for $1. I owned this also back probably about 15 years ago. No, maybe a little bit more than that. This came out in 2006, I believe. And it says here, the best of Massive Attack features, and then blah, blah, blah. Also includes special dual disc of new songs and rare material, all the videos. So that's you can see here as well, we see these things on the front of kind of DVDs or Blu-rays because it's a rating, because there's a DVD as the second disc, but it's a dual layer or dual, what are you going to call it, double disc thing. So the greatest hit selection's there. So we've got Safe from Harm, Karma Coma, Angel, Teardrop. Angel is amazing as well. Like, again, talking about a dark song. Inertia Creeps, Protection, all the songs you'd expect. And then there's dual disc. There's got some other songs there, maybe never heard before. And then they've got all the videos. And they've made some great videos over the years. Some not so great as well, or just kind of normal. But the first thing I ever saw of theirs was the Unfinished Sympathy video, which kind of basic in its way, but also I love that video as well. It's the way it starts off, kind of focused in on these guys. The guys doing like the juggling the kind of metal balls in his hands. You know, those like stress balls, Chinese things that like metal, and they make that ringing noise. And then the camera pulls up, like a kind of a crane shot, and then it goes down to the street, and it follows in as she's walking towards Shara Nelson, singing the lyrics in a single shot, walking through. I think it looks like LA, and in the background you can sometimes spot the different members of the band, just walking by or kind of walking behind her. And the other video I always remember of theirs is Protection, which is done by what's his face, Michel Gondry, who I've talked about before about his videos. He's an amazing director for music videos. It's hard to describe the kind of different perspectives he uses, because he does this thing where he changes angles, and then he has people positioned away, and you can't, and when you first see it, you can't tell what's happening. Like, and then you realize, oh, okay, he's not standing, he's lying down, or that's upside down, where it's filmed to look like it's the right way up, and so their movements look slightly strange, but it's the camera's continuously kind of twisting and turning, so it's hard to follow exactly how the angle is supposed to be portrayed or not. And it's this kind of apartment building, and you're seeing the exterior and the different windows in the apartment building, and these kind of different people living their lives. And again, you see the band members like 3Ds in his low apartment doing some like soldering, and Daddy G is bringing his little daughter home and like dropping her off, and then Andrew Mushroom is in his hut playing like with little cars, and there's obviously like meant to be meaning and messages behind these different things that you see. I don't really understand all of it, but it's an amazing video. It's and that song is amazing by itself anyway. The lyrics, it is beautiful. Everything about it. The part where it's fading out, and it's the sound of the rain, and again, just like it's like a perfect song. And for a band to kind of not just have one of those, but to have multiple perfect songs, it's a special thing. Well, I think they're a special band. So the way they do this is that over here in the front envelope, we have the Greatest Hits audio CD, just a regular CD. Again, using the reflective on both sides. So you're like, oh, okay, is it playable? Oh, no, okay, there's like a brown label, so it must be. So that annoys me. Well, it doesn't annoy me, that's not the right word, but I don't see the benefit of it. The other one, they're talking about this dual layer thing. This is a slightly thicker disc, and this is playable on both sides. Okay, so this side, you can see me there, I don't want to show myself, is the audio, no, DVD, it says right there, DVD this side up, I don't know if you can see that, and this side is the audio, and it's a slightly goldish, bronzish color. You can see it's not the usual silver of a compact disc. I don't necessarily like that idea of a dual side disc, because we naturally place things down, don't we? Rest them sometimes while you're taking it in and out of the machine or something like that, and it's inevitable that it's going to get some damage. You can see it's wider. It's almost like it's two discs stuck together, glued together, but it's a little bit, it would be thicker if it really was that. So I'm not sure exactly what they do to achieve that, but that's what it is. It's quite a rare thing. I think over the years I have had some other two-sided discs. I can't remember now, but it's this isn't the first one I've had, and I've never really liked the idea of them because it's just they're open to getting damaged so much more easily than other discs. Anyway, lastly, now I know I've been talking for a long time here. This isn't secondhand. This is a new CD. This is the only one of theirs I have that's new, and this is their most recent album, though it was released 15 years ago now. No, 14. And this is called Heligoland. Heligoland is an island. Is it in the Baltic Sea, maybe, or the North Sea? Kind of like in that Northern Europe sea area above Germany, below Scandinavia, I'm pretty sure. But what you're going to notice is when I do this, this was one of the discs where I threw away the original jewel case and the backing inlay, but I did keep the booklet artwork and the disc. So at some stage, because I got this very cheaply, I remember, back in 2010. I think I've told this story before. Borders, Borders bookstore, they were in New Zealand back then, about a decade and a half ago, and they had a few very large stores around the city. But they were very well stocked, and for me as a New Zealander and also as someone who loves books and loves music and movies, those border stores were amazing. We didn't have anything like that in New Zealand. The bookstores that we had in New Zealand were much smaller and the same thing in every store, and just nothing different or exciting in them. But this Borders bookstores opened, and like there was one in the central city of Auckland, and it was like 4 or 5 levels, and it would have books you couldn't even imagine seeing. And this is when I was at university and I was studying history and philosophy and stuff like that. And some of the books there are like the historical and philosophical books were just amazing, things you would never be able to find. And this was maybe a little bit before, internet shopping had become widely available, and so we were still buying books in shops. And it also had a pretty amazing music section. But fast forward however long, they couldn't turn a profit, and part of that was because the places, the rental on the places they were using, their shop area, was just massive, and people were treating them as like libraries. They would just go in there and sit for hours and read the books off the shelves. I think I did that sometimes too. But anyway, and it's not just that. Bookshops around the world have diminished, haven't they? They've gone bankrupt and become much smaller and cut the number of shops. So it's not as though it's just a Borders thing. But anyway, they couldn't survive in the New Zealand market. And so they did these massive cut price sales, just getting rid of everything. And so the CDs, they kind of went down in steps. First it was just like $10 off. And by the end of it, you could get they had deals. I think it was like 5 CDs for $10. So basically $2 CDs. And I got this, I remember 2 or 3 Mastodon albums, like Crack the Sky and Blood Mountain and what else? You couldn't just get anything because a lot of that stuff had already been gone. But the quality of stuff that I picked up was just amazing. And a lot of that stuff I got rid of a few years later. Like this, throwing away the jewel case or just selling it or something like that. But I wish I could go back in time to that, because getting CDs, brand new CDs for that cheap was just a once in a lifetime thing. But anyway, that's when I got this. And it's, again, a brilliant album. I'm not actually sure what the critics thought of this. I think this is like, how could I say? It's a good step as a next album. Like, whereas I think 100th Window is maybe a little bit of a misstep, I think this is a good follow-on. Though, like I said, this is from 14 years ago now. They haven't made anything subsequently, but it's a good album. Let's just say that. I like it. There are some songs on it I really like. It's also the album where Daddy G came back and was part of the recording process. Okay, there's no, as in my back here. There's no track listing. The two songs on it that I especially love are Rush Minute, which I think is track 9. 3D does the vocals for that. And again, just a dark, beautiful song. Then the next song after that is Saturday something. What is it? The vocals on that one are done by Damon Albarn from Blur. And it's actually quite different from the usual. It's much kind of more organic sounding, and it's got a sadness to it as opposed to a darkness. But an amazing song, and also really great lyrics. Saturday Comes Slow. That's it. Saturday Comes Slow. He's singing about, I think he's singing about Bristol, or the southwest area of England. An interview that I read with someone. I can't remember the lyrics off my top of my head, but he says from the southwest kingdom in the limestone caves. But those two songs there, Rush Minute and Saturday Comes Slow, are just amazing, amazing songs. There's other songs on there that are amazing as well. There's one that, what is it? I think Psyche, which is Martina Topley Bird does the lyrics. Babel. The first song, Pray for Rain. I don't know who does the vocals on Pray for Rain, but it's a great album. The more I'm talking about the songs, I realize it's a really, really good album, and I would recommend not sleeping on it, even though it's a later era. You know, a lot of people with bands that have such seminal, recognizable and critically lauded works like Blue Lines and Protection and Mezzanine, people tend to kind of think, well, that's their golden era, and so the stuff later on and I'm guilty of that with bands. A lot of bands where I like things from like the 90s heyday, and then I don't bother listening to anything past that. But I'd say this is as good as anything they did in the 90s, in my opinion. I'm sure people would disagree with that. But yeah, that's almost 40 minutes of me yapping about Massive Attack. I've only got 4 of their albums. Imagine if I had all the other 2. Going a bloody day. But a brilliant band. You know, as I listen to them, I think, you know, this is one of my favorite bands. Just rarely a song I don't like. There is the odd song I don't like, but very rarely. So yeah, Massive Attack. Thanks for watching.